The Raw Men podcast, and I'm going to carry it over to Mark, who has some words from our sponsors.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning into the 7th episode. This episode is sponsored by Bedtime Bible Stories, again, Joey Kirkman and company. The book, as we've been showing, is an excellent illustrated guide, verbatim, of the more should we say, colorful and entertaining stories in the Bible about mauling people and not allowing pregnant women on the ark, and all the good stuff. It's all in there, drawn for your pleasure. So go to bedtimebiblestories.com, pick up the book, and let them know that you heard about it on the Ramen podcast. So back to you, Aaron.
All right, today we are with Scott Lane, who was recommended to us by Zach Copeland, and curiously, the same day that Zach Copeland had recommended, hey, you need to talk to this guy, Scott Lane, I got a message from Scott saying that we needed to talk to Zach Copeland. I thought that was funny. So they're both recommending each other. So, Mr. Lane, you have an interesting story, and I don't want to step on any part of it, so I'm going to let you start it all from the word go. Tell us who you are and what's the deal here.
All right. My name is Scott Lane. How do you even start on this? I live in Louisiana. I live in a parish called Sabine Parish. In Louisiana, we call them parishes instead of counties. My dad moved here in 1983, pastoring a church locally in this parish. He pastored a church locally right next to the school that we had an issue with. I'm a SCADA engineer, so I work in renewable energy, and so I enjoy science. I enjoy a lot of different things and learning all the time. And one of the things when I settled here was it was a laid-back area. I've been around religion all my life. I've probably become immune to it, having been around it so much in my life. I ignored most of it. For most of the time, I've been agnostic or atheist. A little over a year and a half ago, I moved my new wife and stepson to Louisiana from Salt Lake City. We moved down here, and I put my stepson into school. He was excited to go to school with his stepbrothers and sisters. Like any other kid, the first day of school after summer vacation, he was excited. He was in the same class with my daughter, his stepsister. He goes to school the first day. The next day, he's not so excited about going to school. Well, most kids start losing that excitement after a while, so we kind of ignored it, just thought he would want to sleep in. Within the third or fourth day, he started getting sick every morning. He would refuse to get on the bus, absolutely refuse, fought with his mother, would not get on the bus. She would take him dragging, kicking, and screaming to school. About a mile before the school, she would have to pull over, and he would throw up on the side of the road. He just couldn't stand going to school anymore. We couldn't figure it out. A day or two later, he brought some of his paperwork home. On some of the tests, we saw at the bottom of it, the last question, and you somewhat mentioned in the post about this, there was a question on every one of them. Isn't it amazing what the blank has made with 20 exclamation points after it? And he was supposed to fill in the word Lord. Isn't it amazing what the Lord has made? And he didn't have a clue. My stepson, my wife, and her ex-husband adopted my stepson at birth. His biological father is from Thailand, and his biological mother is from Salt Lake City. They picked my wife because she was Buddhist. She left the Mormon church at 18. She had enough of it, found enough information. Excuse my language, she called bullshit when she saw it. And she left the Mormon church, was atheist for a while, found she got picked on a lot for being atheist, became Buddhist, and got more and more into being a Buddhist, not in the supernatural sense, but in the philosophical sense. And so she was chosen specifically because she was Buddhist to adopt my stepson. His biological father wanted to take him back, but not being an American citizen, could not take him back to Thailand. but his biological mother and biological father are still somewhat active in his life. He knows who they are. He stays in contact with them. His biological father, he's the firstborn in that family from his father, who is the firstborn. And in Thailand, that's a very important aspect. His father has sent gold necklaces and different things to his son that are Buddhist, that are family heirlooms that go back like 4 and 5 generations, with a pendant for each grandfather in this lineage. It's a big thing for their family. And so my wife raised him from the day he was born as a Buddhist. He's never known anything else. My wife has not been any kind of Christian or anything since she was 18. His adopted father wasn't any form of religious. He was atheist. And so he had no clue what to do. And when he got these tests, isn't it amazing what the blank has made? He had no clue, literally, what to put on. And I know that's amazing for anybody that was raised in the South, anybody that's seen all the BS that goes on. We're all used to seeing it. Even if you weren't religious, you would know what to say in the South. But in other parts of the country, it's not so obvious. My stepson had no clue what to put. So when we first saw it, we tried to make light of it. We told him, well, put Lord Buddha on there. And so he tried to write it on there. He was nervous. He put it on there. And she came back and marked it wrong. And we found out from my daughter and a couple of my children that she had singled them out in the class and wrote Lord in big red letters and marked the answer wrong on all his tests, and then went down and picked him out of the middle of the aisle in his seat, sat in front of him, and chewed him out for putting that on, or leaving it blank in the first place, and then putting Lord Buddha on it the second time, or the third or fourth time. And she chewed him out, called him stupid for not believing in God, got all the other kids riled up, calling him stupid for not believing in God. Going on, it was just incredible. And the atmosphere that she put him into is what caused him to be sick and not want to go to school anymore. And he was just refusing to go. I called and I talked to the superintendent of the school board. She assured me that it was illegal, that they can't do that. She's their boss. She's going to take care of everything. I said, well, you know what? I probably should call and talk to the principal. I probably shouldn't have jumped straight to the superintendent. So I made an arrangement to go see the principal the following Monday. We went into the school. Excuse me. We dropped my stepson off at one entrance. We drove around, parked, went into the principal's office. And while we were sitting there waiting for the principal, we looked down the hallway and saw my stepson running up the hall bawling. This is a 12-year-old kid. You don't expect a 12-year-old to be crying in the middle of school. You don't expect him to just, he was in absolute tears. He come running up. He had got sick at his stomach again. He had tried to excuse himself to go to the restroom. The teacher called him a crybaby and started calling him names in front of all the other kids. And she told him to go to the office and go home. She didn't want him in his class and some other stuff. So at that point, we decided there's no sense in even talking to the principal. We took my stepson. We drove straight down to see the superintendent of the school board. She wasn't able to see us at that time. We made an appointment for right after lunch. We came back a couple hours later, and we were shocked. We walked in there, and instead of, she knew what we were coming for. She had talked to the school and everybody else about things that had happened, and the school had brought his test scores. She brought the papers in that had, isn't it amazing what the blank has made? But she had to point out how he missed other questions and how he had problems with other things. And he does have a problem with reading. He had a special situation in Utah where they assisted him in trying to get caught up on reading, and he qualifies for it here. He's a smart kid. He just has a problem with reading. And so he had a problem with his spelling and some other issues on the test. That was all she wanted to talk about. Then when we brought up, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for the words at the bottom of the test. We're here for what the teacher's done, how they're picking on him. I promised my wife they're good people here. I promised him that he would be accepted. And I'd lied to my brand new wife. I lied to my stepson. I'd subjected him to things that I couldn't believe I would ever have to subject a human to a person. You know, I promised them they would be accepted and loved, and I thought they would be. So we talked to her, and she started telling us.
Is your wife? I was going to say, is your wife also Asian? Asian
No,
descent?
my wife is from Salt Lake City. She's blonde hair, blue-eyed. She was
Okay.
raised Mormon. She had some issues with the Mormon Church. She figured out all the bullshit with the Mormon Church, and she left at 18, and she made them take her off the rolls at 18. Not just quit going. She made them take her off the rolls. But she's
Okay. So the reason I ask is that you know, my wife has Vietnamese ancestry, so she's sensitive sometimes to this kind of differential treatment. I just wanted to see if there was any kind of involvement with that. But that's okay. Go ahead and continue with your story.
all right. So we're in with the superintendent of the school board, who just the previous week had said, yes, it's illegal. They can't do that. Had said she'll take care of it. Now she was trying to blow it off. She made a comment that she asked us specifically, well, do you have to raise them Buddhist? Can't you raise them Christian? She told us this is the Bible Belt. You should expect it to have to deal with Christianity in the Bible Belt everywhere. I pointed out that the Bible Belt is just a demographic area, but we all fall under the national Constitution, the National Bill of Rights. I mean, that's what our country was founded on. I also pointed out that the Louisiana Constitution also guarantees the freedom of religion and the protection of the government.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that because there was some audio garble that I think was probably consistent throughout the broadcast. So could you repeat what you just said?
Okay. She kept pointing out that we lived in the Bible Belt as if it's a different country, has different laws. I kept pointing out to her that the Bible Belt is simply a demographic area. We still fall under the United States laws. We fall under our Bill of Rights, our Constitution. Even the state of Louisiana has protections for religious freedoms and protections from the government of pushing any religious ideals. She wouldn't have anything to do with it. She pointed out that she goes and has her toes done at some Oriental lady who has a statue of Buddha, and she wasn't offended. I tried to point out the difference between free enterprise and government enforcing or pushing a religion. I tried to point all these things, and she said, well, we were infringing on the teacher's freedom of religion. At that point,
how are you infringing on the teacher's freedom of religion?
Because we weren't allowing her to proselytize to our kids.
Well,
that's all I can
why don't you just correct that? Why don't you just change your religion and allow other people to bully you into their faith? I don't understand where's the problem here. And I missed something else. You mentioned something about, and I'm sorry, it's probably because there's a bit of audio lag and there was a bit of a garble on a couple of things that you said. You mentioned something about an Asian person with a statue of Buddha. Could you, who was not offended? Could you go back over that part because I missed the rest of it?
When we were talking about living in the Bible Belt, the superintendent pointed out that she had her toenails done by an Asian lady who had a statue of Buddha. And she was not offended. And my wife's jaw dropped. I'm sure mine did too.
That's just like the person that is being accused of being a racist, and they say that they know someone that's of the race that they're subjecting racism to, and that
I'm
makes
not racist. I have slaves.
Or,
Yeah.
or I just know a black guy, so I'm not racist. Exactly.
Okay.
And
so let me understand this right. So the person that she is paying to provide a service didn't start an argument with the person who was paying her, and so that justifies her situation.
correct.
Okay.
Our jaws dropped. It was right after that she pointed out that maybe we should change our religion to better fit in. At the time, I was flabbergasted. I was angry. I made some very rude comments. I made comments about the ignorance of the teachers and people in the school board and the teachers. I lost my cool and I made some rude comments. I admit those. We left.
I assure you, you could not have embarrassed yourself more than I would have in the same situation. I guarantee I would have had some very colorful phrases, and that lots of people outside the office would have heard them.
For those of you that are listening on the podcast and not watching it, you go onto YouTube and watch the video, because as Scott's mentioning these things, Aaron and I are just hands in head, eyes rolling back. I mean, this is some very archaic stuff, and I mean, it's happening now that Scott's talking about here.
Well, luckily it's not happening. It is happening now. What I found out, it's happening all over the place. It's not just here. We're not unique. Anyway, when we left the superintendent's office, my brother is a director on a school board in Texas. I contacted him, and he gave me some information. He was a lifelong member of the ACLU, and he helped me out figuring out what to do. I contacted the ACLU. They didn't respond. I wrote letters to the Department of Education, the Department of Justice. I started sending letters to everybody and their brother. I wrote a long, I think it was probably 4 pages long, that I was going to send to the school board. I was pissed. You have no idea how pissed I was.
Oh no, I can grasp that, I think.
And luckily, the ACLU, before I mailed the letter off, I was running through drafts, proofreading it, having some friends proofread it to make sure I had all my laws correct, the legal implications. The ACLU called me back, and they took my case, told me not to send it in, and then we started working, building the case. My kids came home every day. Let's see, it started in September. They came home every day all the way until the end of January, almost every week, bringing me probably 5 to 10 pages of incriminating evidence. Every time we went to school, I took pictures of something new every time. When you walked into the school, I never noticed it before, but if you walked in and looked straight behind, if you were walking out the school doors, you look up above the doors, there's this giant picture of Jesus hanging over the doors. When you walk down the school hallways in front of the classrooms, it looked just like a Sunday school. There were posters of kids praying, Bible verses plastered up and down the walls. Everything was had Bible verses. It was ridiculous. The marquee outside every week had a new Bible verse on it. It was just one thing after the other. And we started putting it in. We were going to file before Thanksgiving. I mean, we had already taken my stepson out and put him into a new school. And they were a lot better. They were treating him with kid gloves. They knew there was an issue. They treated him pretty well. I've got no complaints about the way they've handled. They've made sure to keep him isolated from some of the other stuff as well as possible.
Now, what do you mean? What do you mean? Some of the new school is keeping your stepson isolated from other stuff?
Christmas came. The teachers put out a book with a Christmas story about Jesus and the Jesus birth and everything going on. And there was an issue, and they ended up taking and making sure he was somewhat. He saw it at first, and we mentioned it, and they took care of it. When he first went to the new school, the other kids found out he was Buddhist, and so they would come with their little crosses hanging on their neck and touch him with their cross to see if he melted. They thought he was, I don't know, a vampire, I guess, and was going to melt with a cross. And the principal and everybody else went to outlandish lengths to protect him. They got onto the kids a little harshly than I thought. Some of the kids were just curious. This was a perfect opportunity for kids to learn that not everybody's a Christian. Christianity isn't the only belief out there. This was a perfect opportunity, and I think they were a little bit harsh on these kids. It was a good time to teach them. One of the issues, he had a little girlfriend for a while until her brother told her parents, and they made her quit seeing the little Buddhist kid. There were little things, but the school has gone out of their way to try to stop any of that. Some kid read him a note that he was going to beat him up or something, and so they suspended the kid. They've done everything from a school. They can't protect them from real life, but they've done everything that they can as a teacher and administrators. A lot of the kids come to school with stuff from their parents, and the only way you can change that is to educate them into school. And I think they're trying at the new school. They really are. Back to the old school, the day after we talked to the superintendent, they sent a letter to the school that the principal read over the PA system. My kids immediately called me right after school to give me the information. They read a letter over from the school board telling them how proud they were for supporting their Christian values and continuing to be solid Christians. I have a bunch of other stuff too, but I remember those two phrases. Again, I was pissed. So we got the ACLU, we started compiling evidence. We stopped filing in November because of the war on Christmas. We didn't want to get caught up in the other mess. We didn't want to get thrown under with all the other publicity. This is when I really started looking into things. Prior to that time, prior to last year, I was more of a, I'm just going to ignore everything. It's not going to piss me off. I'll let it roll off my back. After last year, I started noticing everything that I just, being raised in the area, I had let roll off my back. Everything stood out. So the war on Christmas started to become something that really pissed me off. I started a separate Facebook page. Had to pull it down for the court case. But I started trying to debate with people and trying to get them to understand that your ideas of Christianity are fake. You don't even know what you believe in. Why are you claiming to be a Christian? I went really off the deep end. I'm probably an asshole. Now, I'm pretty sure I was an asshole.
Well, that's completely understandable. It's one of the problems that anti-theists have, myself included. I mean, it's especially bad when you used to have a religious background and then you start recognizing how you've been, systematically, methodically lied to all your life. People have a tendency to react. I know a few people who find themselves becoming increasingly outraged at the very kind of thing that you're talking about, and they've got justification to be so. But when you're so far outnumbered, that actually polarizes the situation even worse, and so you become a louder activist in those cases. And I just want to caution some people when they start getting really, really mad that there's got to be a way to control it, and there's got to be a way to act on it at the same time. You can't, you can't let it roll off your back, but you also don't want to take it to extremes. So just interjecting. So go ahead with your story.
You actually brought a good point. I'd like to take a sidebar for a second. You really need to stand up. When I went to school, they're not putting God back into school. When I went to school, there was none of this God in there. I came from a Christian background, but there was none of the stuff that they've got in schools nowadays. My oldest son, when he was in school, they may have had a prayer at a football game, but that was about the extent of it. In the past 10 years, the amount of religion that has been interjected into schools around this country, I think has gotten extremely out of hand. It's become a whole movement. I found that there are lawyers that do nothing but train teachers how to get around laws. I found there are whole groups in Florida that do nothing but try to push their agenda in creation, try to teach teachers how to do it and get away with it. And I have.
There are also creationist websites that offer pointers for teachers to bypass the rules, to get around teaching evolution, to misrepresent evolution, how to squeeze creationism into class when you're not living in Louisiana, where they can somehow do it legally. And that's going to be another thing I'm going to have to ask you about soon too. Anywhere else in the country, I would think that this would have been an open and shut case just for all the religious nonsense on it. But I mean, I'm seeing it in Texas too. I was recently at a school that said it had "In God We Trust" right there on the front door.
I saw that. I supported you on that.
Yeah, no, that's also sadly since 1954. That was the American motto. Since it's on our dollar bills, it's hard to get it off our schools. But the things that you're talking about seem only possible to happen in Louisiana. So I mean, what is it that Louisiana has that enables all of this to go on?
Well, we have this really special law that Zach, and this is why I'm a big supporter of Zach and a guy named Lamar White, about Zach's age. Um, they are really active supporters. Every year, Zach gets down and he fights our religious legislatures who, and I'll be honest with you, I think most of them know it's bullshit, but they buy votes with it. We have a thing called the LSEA, the Louisiana Science Education Act. It was originally put into place for teachers to be able to add supplementary information to question creation, or excuse me, to question evolution in the classroom. What is your goal? To question evolution? It's not to question science. It's to question for your religious beliefs and try to supplement something. It was specifically touted at that. We have copies of the governor making statements on that. Almost every politician that voted on it has made some comment about it.
Yeah, I remember your governor actually said that teaching of creationism was, he put it, he said it was the best science possible. Now, this is a guy that we know already has a degree in biology, correct?
Correct.
Yes. He has a biology degree before he turned all fundamental, and so he's not coming from that thing. I mean, he came from a Hindu ancestry where modern Hindus accept evolution. Then he moved into Catholicism, and Catholics accept evolution. But then he gets into this environment where suddenly it seems, to myself and several others, like he has sold out to the religious right. Like we have, there's a lot of people who suspect he's not teaching his own kids creationism, but he's certainly going to sell that to his constituents because that's where he's getting all his votes.
Well,
from.
it's a little bit of a vacuum in that area because the constituents want a political candidate that supports these ideas, so the political candidates support the ideas to get votes, and then the people that vote for them want the ideas, and it goes back and forth, and you kind of get an echo chamber. And that seems like what's happened a little bit with Jindal and Louisiana and the other Louisiana lawmakers. Is that right, Scott?
Oh, I definitely agree. I think, and this brings up one of the points I want to make. When I got into this, I came from a religious background. My dad was a preacher. My dad went to seminary for like 10 years of my childhood. I learned some of the Greek. I learned some Hebrew. I learned a lot of the biblical history. I learned the skewed history that you read about from a Southern Baptist background, but I learned a lot about it. I know more about Christianity than most of the Christians. And I didn't realize it was all atheists knew more about Christianity than Christians. But at the time, I thought I was unique because I knew more. I now know people like Aaron, you know a whole lot more about religion than I know. Anyway, when I started talking to people, most people that claim to be Christians don't have the foggiest idea. They're Christians because their mama was Christian. They're Christian because their grandma took them to church once when they were a kid. So they're whatever religious background they were then. Most of them don't have. It's a superstitious belief.
We've got a bit of a lag. So I apologize, but when I start to talk, on my end, it sounds like I'm stepping on top of your words, and I'm not meaning to. It's the lag in the video. I just wanted to mention that most of the Christians that I know don't know what the word Christian means. They've never cracked open a Bible. They don't know what the Nicene Creed is. They don't know any of that. They just vote the way their church tells them to, and that's pretty much it.
I don't even know they vote the way their church tells them. I think they vote the way their grandma or their mother tells them because she went to church. I mean, they don't go to church. When I started looking at the numbers in Sabine Parish, there's 24,000 people in Sabine Parish. It's on the high end of religiosity in the state of Louisiana, which is high for the whole U.S. But even here, it's only 80% claim to be Christian. Out of 80% Christian, only 25% of them actually go to church any Sunday. When you look at the average daily attendance, and I use the school term, average daily attendance, when you look at the average Sunday attendance, it's only 25% of the people claiming to be Christians even go to church on Sundays. There's a small percentage that fluctuates, comes in and goes, but the number is only 25%. There's probably another percentage. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. That percentage pretty much matches the Christians that I personally know here in Texas. It would be at best a quarter of them ever go to church at all. So yeah.
And it matches all the Pew Research information. I started following all the polls and everything, and we fall in line with everybody else. So that leaves the other 75% of self-proclaimed Christians at some level of just claiming it, or may have been religious and kind of backed off, or what we call backslidden in the South, or the people that never go back and just claim it for pure superstitious reasons. They wouldn't have the first. When they look at the books, how many people know the four Gospels? The Pew Research did the poll on that. It was pathetic how many people claiming to be Christian know anything about their Bible. And when I look at that, people that are pushing to put it into their schools, A, they don't know the history. They obviously have no idea of our founding fathers, what they actually said about it. They have no idea what Jesus said about sticking religion into the government or disobeying your government. They just don't know what they're doing. They're doing what they're told to believe in. And it creates a big problem. When we get in Louisiana, that allows that 25% fundamental group to start basically becoming a very dogmatic group proselytizing to our children in school. The problem is not that somebody's trying to help somebody by leading them to some religious belief. The problem is when you do that to a kid, when you do it to a young kid whose mother or parents have told that kid to trust the teacher, go to school, the teacher's going to help teach you. You need to learn what she can tell you. Then that kid goes to school, and the teacher's telling that child that the mother's full of shit, or the parents are full of shit, that you're stupid because you believe your mother. What does that do to a kid? You put that child in a place where they have no idea who to believe, what to believe. You put them in an environment where all the kids start bullying them. I mean, that's horrible to do that to a child. And that's what people pushing the religion do.
Let me ask you this. I mean, we mentioned about Bobby Jindal, your state governor, and how he has a Catholic background, and prior to that, it was his ancestral Hindu background. Now, you mentioned that the demographics in your area is 80% Christian. Well, one might assume that the remaining 20% is atheist, but the more accurate representation would be that there is, at least 10% of other religions in that group, right? Where are the Catholics? Where are the Hindus? And when I say Catholic, is because in southern states, very often the Protestant denominations have tried to ostracize Catholicism as a non-Christian denomination, as if it's a completely different religion. And they do this with the Mormons too, and some of them even do it with the Jehovah's Witnesses. And what they don't realize they're doing is that they're taking Christianity from the dominant religion of the world, and by removing Catholics, which make up over half of all of Christianity, by removing Catholics, you've made Islam the largest religion in the world, and you've made Protestant Christianity the fourth largest religion under Hinduism. So what is it? Is there no Hindu students in this state? Are there no atheist students? Are there no Muslim students anywhere in this whole state?
We have all of those in the state, not in Sabine Parish.
What happens to those kids in these schools?
That's exactly my point. When you do that, you're sending that child mixed signals. You're telling them the child's parents told them to trust the teacher. The teacher's telling them don't trust your parents. And those kids are all over the place. They're not just in the bigger cities. When I say 80%, you have that 20% of every other version. Even when you take that 80%, what are Southern Baptists? I think there were like 30% of that 80% block. 25%. Sabine Parish has a higher than average Catholic background. I think it's about 20% is Catholic of the 80. Then we have Assembly of Gods. Then you have some of the other splinter groups, Pentecostal and different groups, and they include Mormons in the Christian in that 80%. So that 20% that is outside of what they call Christian are really the outside. They're probably predominantly non-religious, which I would have called myself a year ago just non-religious, and then the atheists, which I call myself now. We make up probably that 20%. We just hide in the corner and stay away from everybody.
Well, and that's the important thing. As people like yourself move more and more from the non-religious or the opt-out and become more and more atheists and vocal about their atheism, it normalizes atheism in general. I know that right now on Twitter, there's a large campaign going with the hashtag normalize atheism, and some of the stories, they're one-sentence stories, but they're like, you know, I fish with my son too. That's why we should normalize atheism. Or I shop at the same grocery store as you. You know, and I think that's one of the biggest things. The more non-believers are able to say, and David Silverman has an excellent speech about it, the more non-believers are able to say, I'm an atheist and here I am and I'm fine, the better it is for everybody. And I'm glad that you've moved from the opt-out and the non-believer to the proud atheist ranks.
Yeah, and I want to comment also, you had mentioned that your wife was once upon a time atheist and now identifies as Buddhist. And I know that Buddhism is sometimes worships Siddhartha Gautama as a god, and many times they're just atheists seeking a culture that atheism itself doesn't provide, because you do get some kind of a cultural benefit from Buddhism.
Correct.
You get some of the trappings that you would otherwise miss as far as a cultural identity. But for most people, when they make this move, if they do, down the steps of disbelief, many of them are complacent with apatheism, that they don't care if a God exists, and they're fine with that forever. But for people that find themselves like you are, in a situation where you have to recognize what's going on, a lot of them do this series of steps before they will put on that big red A word and attach it to themselves. And I hope my wife doesn't mind telling me telling the story, but she went through a series of steps as well. And as she has some Asian ancestry, she at one point was kind of leaning toward Taoism, because if you've ever read the Tao Te Ching, there's actually some very positive stuff in there. So she identified to someone in West Texas. She identified as a Taoist, and she was reprimanded because that's not what normal people believe. Now, just think about it. So you're talking about somebody with Vietnamese ancestry, so let's address somebody in Vietnam, and you're going to tell them that either Buddhism or Taoism isn't normal? You know,
right.
I don't understand how these people don't realize how outrageously insensitive that is. Or in many cases, they don't care how bigoted that is, and that's another thing that shocks me. Because when you point out that some people are being bigoted, they will wear the bigot label proudly, and then criticize you or whoever's speaking as being politically correct, as if being politically correct is wrong. Yeah, and being bigoted is correct, as if being bigoted is somehow tolerable.
Right.
I don't think that. I know there are people that think that way, but I cannot think that way. And one of the disadvantages that I have is that I can't put myself in other people's shoes that way. I can't say, well, from your perspective, no, I can't see that other perspective because it's wrong, and that's the only way that I can react to it. So I have to wonder, what happens to other kids in these schools that are Muslim or that are Hindu or atheist in Louisiana schools? I mean, do you just keep your mouth shut?
Well, you hit a key aspect that I really want to touch on. And I'm going to kind of spin off here for just a few minutes. The way this normally happens right now, and we're failing because there's becoming more and more religion in schools all over the country. We're not hearing less about it. We're seeing it more. We're seeing more people violating it, pushing the limits every year. The war on Christmas is being waged by the Christians. They're the ones stuffing it in our face every year. It's really getting out of control. We cannot stop it with the court cases. What happens normally is if somebody complains, if they decide to stand up, and this is if they're really brave enough, they write a letter to the ACLU, the FFRF, one of these other groups, they're going to get a letter sent to the school. The school will then send a letter back saying, yes, we're going to comply. then they're going to just dog that person out of the school. That person's going to be dogged out of the community. They're not going to be welcome at the grocery store. They're not going to be welcome at the gas station. They're not going to be welcome anywhere they go. Anywhere on Facebook, their friends are going to leave them. They're going to dump them. They're going to be alienated. The kid's going to be picked on in school. They're going to leave. Then the school goes right back to what they were doing because the person complaining is gone. On the other
hand, we get the same thing. We get the same thing from people like Jessica Alquist, where she is absolutely alone, and if there is any other non-believers in the school, they're staying quiet, which isn't helping their case. It isn't helping her case. So what you're suggesting is that the court case is only going to single out the person to be victimized by the surrounding society, and that it therefore needs to be a collective within the society itself. All the grassroots free-thinking groups, the non-believers, the skeptic societies, whatever the little meet-up groups are that are starting to organize and become politically active, need to be more openly visible in the community.
Yes. There are actually, I'm looking at this trying to figure out how to do it, because just like in that aspect, if you go to court, you become like we do. The son that I introduced you to at Free Thought, the day we were at Free Thought, he got a text from the girl he had been at the fair with the night before. She told her parents who she was with. She was forbidden to see that Lane boy. They didn't know it. They don't know us from Adam. They're another part of the parish. But she was forbidden to see that Lane boy that filed the lawsuit. This stuff goes on and on. So even if you file the lawsuit, then you get a court injunction. So even if we leave, it's going to be under the court injunction. And you have to do that to actually enforce anything. But when you do that, you're still putting your children into harm's way. You're putting your children up to being subjected to bullying and every other, not just by the kids, but by the teachers. You're bullied when you go into the community. There are good people in the community. Not everybody's this way, but we still see it daily. We still see people turn their back and not want to work with us at a store that we used to go to. It happens. And
yeah,
most
and it happened in Dover, Pennsylvania, too. The people, Kitzmiller Group and the other people that were filing with them, they went through the same thing with their community, where their community turns their back and you'll have to go to another cashier because I won't serve you, that sort of thing. And this is insidious that this even goes on. And this is one of the reasons that I'm an activist now. This is one of the reasons that I'm so concerned about a continuously polarizing community, or I say community, but what I'm talking about is it's the population of the United States used to be more mainstream, both in regard to religion and science, that most people accepted a bit of both. If you look at statistics now, you have atheism on the rise in every state in the Union. But it doesn't imply what you think it does, because creationism also is on the rise. And the only way that is possible is that the people who were middle of the road are dividing. They're either giving up science completely and turning to woo and becoming religious, or they're giving up religion completely, and so you end up with a society that is completely polarized, one side or the other. And I don't actually like that, because I know what that leads to as far as potential conflict, and that it could be bad. So I mean, it's not that I'm trying to get rid of religion altogether, though I would love to see it go away. I'd like, I have certain aspirations about what the impact that I would like to have. I'd like people to be more skeptical. I would like people to care more about what is really true rather than what they would prefer to believe. These sorts of things. But I'm also not about attacking people. And religion, so far as I can see, the way that it's practiced in the United States is very much about attacking other people, on an individual level and broad brushed across the board. And that school that I mentioned that I was at that you saw the picture of in God We Trust, somebody had sent me a video of a school play that had been done there, where one of the lines out of the school play was that they had to credit the founding fathers for basing the Constitution on the Word of God and a covenant between God and Moses. This is what the history books in Texas are now saying. This is how bad that is.
I know, it's getting horrible.
Yes, sir. And so what happened? You were filing all your evidence and everything. You laid off in November because you didn't want to be part of the war on Christmas. I have to put my sandbags up around the house come November too for the same reason. But then what happened after that?
All right. I'll try to wrap this part up. We kind of drug it out until the end of January, February. We filed it. The school came out immediately. We got all the backlash. A car with some people dressed in white robes drove by the house. I was out of town that weekend. They called my wife a bunch of racial epithet, threatened her, threatened my children, and then took off. We started getting all kinds of email and hate mail and every other aspect. There were also some good, solid people that supported us, told us to make sure. My wife had a little part-time job at the time, and the school, some people from the school called. Her part-time job supported her. Some of the people at the school called trying to get her fired.
How were they trying to get her fired? What kind of things were they saying?
They were calling in complaining that this store needed to get rid of her. They were calling in wanting to complain, calling in harassing her.
Just they want to harass her because she's Buddhist.
Yeah, and still at this point, a lot of people think she's Asian. My son met somebody from Manny at college last week that still thought my wife was Asian. So a lot of people don't know us.
I want to clarify on that too. I mean, if they see your stepson, they might imagine that
Correct.
His mother is Asian. But you pointed out earlier in the show that she's not. She's blonde, typical white type features, right?
Correct.
Right. And then the people that have reactions to your son, so far, all the indications that you've heard so far, none of it has anything to do with his having Thai ancestry. All of it immediately ties to his non-Christian status as a Buddhist. Is that right?
That's predominant. I mean, some of it ties into the Thai background, but most of it goes to religion. I mean, there was the comments about he needed to go to a school where there were more Asians. There were some little stuff like that. I want to point out that the president of the school board lives across the street and down the road from my ex-wife. His nephew and niece got property from him right next to him on the road. My son was jogging down the road trying to prepare for the track team, and he had a friend with him that was a different race, and they were going down the road together, and on their way back they called the cops, pushed him off in the corner until the cops got there and accused him of attempted trespassing and attempted dog theft. I don't even know if those are real crimes, but evidently they are. They did not, because my kids were white, the cops would not arrest my kids, but because the other kid was black, my kid's best friend, they arrested him. It cost us $3,000 to get the DA to finally drop the charges against him. Just because he was black and with my kids.
Yeah, that's
a lot of racism here.
Yeah, that's another topic altogether. I mean, here in Texas, we have, I hope I'm getting the statistics right. It's something like 70% of the prison population is black. And if you look statistically at the chances of somebody being arrested for any given crime, it's roughly that same percentage. If you're black, you're 70% likely of being arrested, where you might be let go if you're white under the same. You know,
yeah.
It's horrific, and it's one thing I have no ability to understand how people are that way. I find it noxious. I always have, and I come from a very racist background. My whole family was extremely racist, but it was something that, whereas I picked up on some of the things that they would impose on me, and culturally as a child, that one thing, listening to the way that they would talk about Navajos, for example, because we lived near the reservation, the way they would talk about Mexicans, the way they would talk about blacks, all of it just, it was sickening to me. It was something that I had a natural revulsion to. Some things that they imposed on me actually stuck, and I had to fight my way out of that. But that, fortunately, was not something that I was ever encumbered with. And I don't mean to eat up your time. Please continue.
So anyway, I'll kind of get back to the point here. We ended up getting into court. We filed. The school board said, denied everything. They're going to fight all the charges. We put a ton of evidence onto the ACLU website, put it out. My wife and I followed this for like the next couple of weeks. We saw reports in newspapers and shows all across the world getting posted. and it was really amazing, the outpouring across the whole world. What in the world is going on? The local school was getting, we were told the school and the teachers were getting threats. How could you do that to a kid and stuff like that? We were really impressed with how much support we received across the world. We didn't want anybody to get hurt at the school, obviously. Even one of the pastors stood up and said, no, we need to have the separation of church and state. You can't have them together. It's against the law. We had a local pastor stand up in our defense. There are some people that get it around here.
And I do want to applaud that, too, because every now and again you do get people out of the clergy that realize the reason that the First Amendment exists and how it also protects them. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so anyway, they were going to fight it, but our lawyers predicted pretty much everything, what was going to happen and how it was going to go. When they talked to their lawyers, here's the problem. When you sue a school like this or you write the letter, even if you take it to get the court order against it, what's going to happen is they're going to talk to their lawyers that are provided by an insurance company. They know they're going to lose. There's no win. You can't get around it. They're going to say settle. The school then settles. Minimize any cost, any damage. The insurance company goes on. The school goes back and keeps living life. There's no, they have to change a couple of little things. They get the claim that they're now have been subjected to some kind of villainy by the atheist, and everybody goes on. And as soon as somebody gets run out of town, they go back to what they were doing. So we're not winning anything. We're not getting anything. One of the things that I want to bring in, and I know I'm running out of time, and so I'm going to be really quick. There's a couple approaches that I want. I want to bring in where every school has to start giving sensitivity training. Any other employee across the country has to pass OSHA classes every year, ongoing training about how you violate somebody's civil rights. The second
I got to tell you, before that first one, there was huge objection when somebody suggested sensitivity training. There was huge uproar in this state over anybody being required to be sensitive to anybody that wasn't of the same belief system as they were. I'm not kidding.
Ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Yes.
We did get that. That's one of the things that we want. All the teachers have to have training now on the law, what the law requires, and they also have to have the psychological aspect taught to them. They have to understand what the impact is to a children or to a child put in that situation. I think that's important to get put in for all teachers. If you're going to be dealing with kids, you need to go through that every year. You need to understand how the law changes every year and also emotionally how that impacts our children. I'm also looking at
just basic psychology. If you're going to be working with children, you should have some kind of basic understanding of psychology, that you don't ostracize a child. You don't violate that child's constitutional rights in front of the rest of the classroom. You don't dishonor that child. I mean, what's wrong with these people that they don't see this? But you're right. It's common and it's pervasive throughout this culture, and it's very disturbing.
Since my case, I've started, as I told you, I've become an activist in this sense. It's not just here. Like you saw in Texas, I got involved with writing letters to that school. That school had the play the year before. There's another school, actually, there's 30 schools right within 50 miles of my house that have some issue going on where somebody's complaining. And I'm on these boards or talking on these Facebook posts, and people talk about it. They bring it up, but they're afraid to do anything. And they're atheists. They're on these private communities where they can open up, but they're afraid to actually say anything. And I can't blame them. It's hard.
That's where I gotta call out to anybody that finds themselves in this sort of a situation. If you need community, I mean, if you're not already connected to one, there are free thought groups in a network across the country. If you can go to meetup.com and put in atheist or free thought, and that'll connect you to people in your zip code area that you can network with other people for additional support. And I highly encourage this because I get letters of this kind all the time. People really do need some kind of community support of this sort, especially when if you don't know how many other people you've got on the sidelines with you, then you're the one person that's being ostracized and turned away and might be tempted to move to somewhere else.
If you're watching this or you're listening and you're still battling with being out and being and trying to understand and trying to find community with people that are not religious and not going to pressure you, judge you, if you want to just send a message to us at the podcast, theramenpodcast@gmail.com, send us an email and I'll get back to you and help you find resources in your area.
The ramen, is there a hyphen in there? Is it just
Nope,
RA?
nope. theramenpodcast@gmail.com. No underscore, no hyphen, nothing.
Okay. Yeah, I would be interested. That. I would be interested also in hearing about any of these kind of issues that you have anywhere in the country or anywhere we might potentially have something to do with it.
One last thing I'm working on. It's kind of a two-prong approach. There's going to be some legal issues, but I'm trying to get a cloud repository that can maintain a chain of evidence where initially it can be an anonymous submission by anybody, and before it becomes a piece of evidence, they'll have to agree to it, but it'll still be put in the cloud. So when a school does this, or a school puts a test out, or a kid finds a picture, or even makes a comment, you can write your statement and deposit it into a cloud repository. It'll go in there and it'll be anonymous, but we can start collecting and you can see the amount of evidence, maybe not the quality of evidence, but the amount of evidence for any given school. My idea is if there's a potential opening where what you're doing in your school is no longer hidden in your school, if it's up there to be seen by newspapers, by the insurance company that's actually underwriting your teachers, if all that's available and you start seeing your school is getting a lot of hits, you understand that you have students in your school that are just being quiet and trying to be hidden, but they do find offense at what you're doing when you're pushing your religions. I'd like to tie in the insurance companies that underwrite these schools because they hold the actual deterrent to the teachers. They're the ones that set the prices for the insurance for the teachers. They're the ones that set what they're going to cover for the teachers. There has to be a deterrent in the first place. Otherwise, these websites, these lawyers in Shreveport or in Florida, they're going to continue to keep pushing teachers to break the law. And I'm sorry, if you're a teacher and you're willing to violate the law for your religion that tells you to obey the law, you're a hypocrite.
And it tells you to oppress. And it tells you to oppress other people's rights.
Correct.
And against their freedom of religion. I want to ask you one more time, since you are an activist now, is there a way that people should get in touch with you if they have similar complaints or if they want to network with you or find out your perspective? What website or email address or what would you give these people?
All right, my email is gscottlane@hotmail.com. I'm new at activism, so I'm not a professional at this, so look me up on Facebook, Scott Lane. If you look it up on there, tie it to that email address and Sabine Parish, Louisiana, and you'll find me.
Very good. Very good. And any other closing comments?
No, just please, if it's going on at your school, don't sit back and let it go. You've got to stand up because every time you let each little piece slide, it builds up bigger and bigger, and some child is going to get hurt. And yes, I have one more thing if I got time.
What is it?
People told me at one time that they were proud of me or that we were brave for standing up. I wasn't brave. I was only protecting my children. The brave people are the ones that see it and stop it for somebody else's child, that don't have anything involved. The teachers that stop it before it hurts kids. The school board members that stop it because they know it's wrong. Those are the real brave heroes. That's it.
Thank you very much, sir. And Mark, do you have anything to
add? No, I just would encourage everyone to do like we've been talking about. Just if you're already out in your life, or if you're if you're an atheist and you're trying to help others, the best thing you can do is be yourself and try to normalize the idea of disbelief in life. I would encourage everybody to go on Twitter and use the hashtag normalize atheism, because I think a lot of people are being helped by that. Thank you to our sponsor, Joey Kirkman, at bedtimebiblestories.com. Check out the book. And that's all I really got. Aaron, what's going on in the next episode?
Well, as I always say, everyone complains and anyone can criticize every solution that is ever proposed, but I want to talk to the people who are doing something. So who do you know that's trying to fix things and might actually make a difference? Contact me on Facebook, contact me on email, however you can. Let us know who you would like to see talking to us on the show. On our next podcast, The Raw Men will be on October 30th. That's the day before Halloween, or night before Halloween, and we will be talking with Dr. Adam Daniels of the Dogma of Angra Mainyu. That's the satanic church that want to put a statue of Baphomet next to the 10 Commandments of the Oklahoma State Capitol.
Yes. Tune in for that. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, guys.
And I'm closing up, so thank you all, and good night.